Hey everyone, Tactics here with my second last advanced tormented route video going into the mists of Tirna Scithe. As with my other videos in the series, these routes do not hold back when it comes to things like executing highly coordinated and dangerous pulls, using skips, and even requiring certain classes or specs. So if you're a player just looking to achieve KSM, or if you're someone who's pugs a lot, I would recommend checking out my simple routes video, which you can find linked down below or over on my channel, where I go through some easier to execute routes for all 8 dungeons. With that said, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you learned something, and let's get right into it. Now, Miss is a dungeon where this is probably going to be a bit of a shorter video because there's a huge randomness in terms of what your percent can be. There's a big variance in the maze. And so basically what I'm going to try and go through is the polls before and after, where you don't have, well, you have some choice, but not too much. But really a lot will come down to how your maze works out, and so I'm going to focus on that section on tips and tricks to kind of get better ending maze trash percents. But starting off at the beginning of the dungeon, I'm assuming you guys have a Night Fae. We use that Night Fae gate to get this pull immediately, and we just group up all these spike claws on top of this villager and the 3-pack here. And on fortified weeks, we do tend to pop Bloodlust on this pull. Do note that you want an offensive dispel, whether that's Arcane Torrent, Mass Dispel, whatever it is, on these spike claws here. Some people do leave it up for the damage amp, but it gets a little spooky, so we just purge that off. And we do actually commit Lust here on fortified weeks. Now, there will be some groups that save Lust for Ingra, and so that is kind of, you really need to know what your group's damage output is to decide whether or not you need to commit Lust to Ingra, which gives you worse overall Lust timings but can maybe save you more time, or if you're fine to not commit Lust on Ingra. And basically what you need to figure out is, okay, do we have the damage to, with Bloodlust, eliminate an entire phase of Ingra Malik? So if it lets you, say, kill him in the second exposed phase with Bloodlust, but if you hadn't have Bloodlust, it would have taken you until the 3rd phase. That is 100% worth the Bloodlust commitment. Now, if you have to commit Bloodlust and you're still killing him in the 2nd phase, whereas you would have killed him in the 2nd phase whether you had Bloodlust or not, then that's kind of a situation where Bloodlust wasn't really worth putting on Ingra. Because it makes the timings throughout the dungeon a little bit worse if you do put it on Ingra, but it can be a time save, like I said, if it allows you to skip a phase. And so that's a little tough because for a lot of groups, you're not going to really be sure if you can do that unless you've actually done the key before and either failed it or succeeded, right? So for safety, you can put it on Bloodlust. You can also kind of look at what your group comp is and say, okay, how much do we scale with Bloodlust? Because some comps have classes like, I don't know, Arcane Mage, Venthyr, Boomkin, they do great things with Bloodlust, maybe Unholy DKs, those kind of things. But then there were some classes that don't do as much with Bloodlust, so it's a much smaller gain than some of those classes I mentioned. Maybe Outlaw Rogues don't have a massive gain with Bloodlust, you know. Some Arms Warriors or Fury Warriors don't have a huge gain compared to like Venthyr or Arcane, right? So it really depends on what your group comp is, how much benefit you get from Lust, and how much damage you think you can do. On tyrannical weeks, usually it is worthwhile to commit Lust to Ingra just because it can help you move, you know, to 3 phasing instead of 4 phasing. But this is also like one of those bosses where I think it's a bit of an outlier right now. If we look at all of the bosses on tyrannical, it just takes so long, and it's just to time miss on tyrannical. On the higher keys, you need like a perfect comp for this boss to try and burn it down to save you time. Otherwise, this boss is not surprising to take like 4, 5, 6 minutes on higher tyrannical keys. So I wouldn't be surprised if this boss eventually gets nerfed this season, but at least for now, that's how we deal with it. You have to kind of make that decision whether it's worth committing Lust or not for this boss. On fortified weeks, we do tend to pick Lust over here, though, just because we don't think Bloodlust really saves us that much time on this boss, and it makes this pull a whole lot safer. From there, we do Shroud through. This skip can be done by not just Shroud. You could just sap, you don't even need to commit Shroud. You could Mind Soothe, you could Paralyze and Ring of Peace. There's just a whole bunch. You can Lock Gate over here. Lots of stuff you can do to get by this. Worst case, you can Invis Pot. But we actually Shroud through because we Mind Soothe these 2 guys and the Lieutenant here, and we sneak in and we get our mushrooms first, and then we hit the lieutenant. The wall's kind of fake here, so you can kind of just tag him and kill him in this room, so we have some space. This is another dungeon where Arcolith is tied with Varuth, and Oros is tied with this Soggodon, so it doesn't really change much in that sense. So whether this is Varuth or Arcolith, doesn't matter. You're pulling them in, you're killing them. And then you can do this 4-pack here, 2-pack here. One thing to note before this boss, if you have a pet class in your group, so Hunter, Unholy Death Knight off the top of my head, they have to have a controllable pet. So if you have a controllable pet, you can actually move over to like this area here and send your pet to attack this lieutenant. So this is either going to be Varuth or Arcolith, depending on the rotation, and you can actually get this second damage power before this boss. So if you have that in your group, that's a nice benefit. That'll help with this boss a decent amount, and I would definitely recommend doing that if you have that available to you. You probably want to do that close to this pack dying. It does take him about 15-ish seconds, maybe 20 seconds to get over here. But just be aware that that aura will be active. So if it is Varuth, it can be a little scary with these guys jumping around doing damage. When it comes to the boss himself, Oros is right here, or Soggodon. If it's Soggodon, 100% of the time we skip him. If it's Oros, similarly, we've kind of experimented with skipping him. We haven't had too many problems. I think this is going to be one of those dungeons because, again, the timer is so tight that you will want to skip both Oros and Soggodon. And if you actually look at the last boss, the lack of movement doesn't hurt you too much because you really shouldn't be moving to dodge these swirlies anyways on this last boss. And aside from that, if you have blinks or big movement abilities to get out for the links, because again, only the one person really needs to get out of the group for that. It can make that a whole lot easier, and you won't even really notice the slow outside of that. So honestly, I don't think this last boss is too bad with the slow, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a double skip on lieutenants for this dungeon. Boss itself, like I mentioned, if Bloodlust lets you skip a phase, it's a huge time save. If it doesn't, it's effectively, it doesn't really save you that much time, and it gives you worse timing. So do what you can with this guy, save your burst for his vulnerable phase, and try and get through him ASAP. If you didn't have a pet class, like we don't, so we just do this guy with a double pack. Druids and pet classes again. So pet classes again can pull through this wall, this 4-pack. Druids can do the big disengage lap play to tag this mob through the wall as well, over the wall. I believe my missed video from last season kind of puts this on display if you want to check that out. But Druids can do that of any spec as long as they're Balance Affinity and Wild Charge. Or pet classes again can tag through the wall. Otherwise though, your maze is going to be a bit random here. So not every dungeon is going to have the same maze, but there are some things you can do to kind of mitigate the RNG of having a good or a bad maze. In particular, I have marked X's in a few spots here. So these are areas in the maze where you can pick up extra % depending on the route you took to get there. So, for example, this X right here, this is the Night Blossom room. You can tag this 4-pack through the wall right on that X if you have a 40-yard range ability, and that will just be added to the pull. So that's an extra % if your maze didn't go through this room to begin with. That's an extra 4-pack you can grab. Similarly, once you're done your whole maze, you can actually walk to this area right here, and you can pull this 5-pack through the wall. This is a ton of % you can just grab. And so if you didn't go through this room to finish your maze off, then you can tag him through the wall and get a nice 5-pack right before the boss. The frog room, there is still a double frog pull. So you can stand over here on the edge and tag the frog and it comes through. You may or may not want to do this. It is an extra 6 and a bit % to get the double frog. Sometimes it's worthwhile, sometimes it's not. I'd say if you have Lust and a high range comp, it's probably a pretty solid choice. If you're like a double or triple melee comp, this might be a bad idea, just because it takes a while for melee to deal with those frogs. But again, this is something available to you if you've had a bad maze leading up to it. And the golden number for the maze you're looking at usually is around 70%, including this stuff. So, like, for example, let's throw out a couple example mazes. Let's say you go down again, you go left here, you go Night Blossom room, and then you go here. Right? Normally, This would leave you at 57%. This is a maze you can get. 57% is terrible. But there are some things you can do to mitigate this, right? Like I said, you can add this pack through the wall. There you go, 63.5. What else can you do? You didn't go through this room down here. You can add this pack, and all of a sudden, we're at a 71% maze. That really, really, really helps to know these few spots to help mitigate, like I said, that bad maze RNG and make it all of a sudden now this is golden. This is a great maze because you got these 2 extra packs and you're ending the maze at 71%, which means that you're able to do only a couple big pulls after the second boss and you're good on percent. An example of a not so good maze. They do still exist. You could go up here, say right, straight. I believe this is a potential maze. You're ending at 57.3%. Not very good, but you can still get this 1 5-pack and kind of salvage a little bit. You end at 65%. You're still forced to do 1 extra smaller pull in the later phases of this area, but all in all, it could have been way, way, way worse. So just knowing these few little spots is really, really important, I would say. It can really help kind of mitigate that bad RNG in the maze and just make your pulls later on in the dungeon just a lot more efficient. In terms of Mistcaller herself, not too much to really talk about here. Boss is fairly straightforward, you know. Don't get hit by the foxes, the dodgeballs. Make sure you're kicking, that kind of stuff. I'm not really going to talk about too much. So there's 2 things you can do after this boss, though. So if you're all quick and you all mount up, you can immediately run this way, through here, and down. This is technically faster if you're just able to mount up immediately and get going, and you can get down here very, very quickly. The seed is over here. You will miss the seed if you're doing this. It's not usually, though, for this dungeon, like I said, it's very tight on time. And so usually if you have to pick up that seed, you're already over time on high keys. So like it's not worth the time to go pick it up if you can do this quicker. So that's where the kind of seed stands on this. So we don't really even worry about picking up that seed, even though we have a night phase. It's just if you're dying, we aren't timing the key, so we don't really care. So we don't get the seed, we just go. And we actually go past this 3-pack, and we do that with sap. So you can actually just sap this acid gullet to the side here. Any of those other CCs that would have worked on that front pack that can work on beasts here. I don't know if in prison and stuff works on beasts, but like Paralyzed Ring of Peace will still work here, that kind of thing. So you can sneak by here again without committing Shroud or Invis Pots, and we do a double pull here. We do pull both these packs back this way to here, this area here, because we don't want this double flyer. Especially on fortified weeks, these flyers just absolutely shred your party, so we try and avoid pulling them entirely. We group this pack up, kill it together. There is only 1 set of kicks. There's only 1 staghorn in this pack, so that's one of the reasons. And then we actually shroud straight through the boss here, do the boss. Lust is normally up. Sometimes it's not up. It really just depends on whether we did a first boss lust. And on that note, your middle lust is going to depend on what your maze is. Like I said, if you end up ever getting like a big pull on a maze, like the double frog pull, or like this 5-pack here is also not a bad lust target. Basically, any big pull that is worthwhile, you can drop your lust on and just burn it there to try and get it on CD. Occasionally, you don't really get that kind of timing for yourself, especially if you lust on the boss here. Likely you will have to lust on Mistcaller on pull, and in that case you definitely won't have lust for Tredova, but it's not the end of the world because you can always lust whenever you get it off CD, either during this triple pull over here that happens after the boss, or if you have a bad maze like on one of these pulls over here, just literally whenever you get Bloodlust. And like I said, that's one of the reasons why lusting on this boss kind of lets you have a bad last lust, because normally lusting early on in this first pack will let you have that Tredova lust. So it really, really just kind of depends on what your initial strategy for the dungeon was, where your second and third bloodlusts will land. Now, like I said, though, we do Tredova. Sargadon only really affects your tank damage here. We haven't really noticed the little bug guys hitting extremely hard with Sargadon up. They may hit harder, they may get the 50% buff, but in general, you shouldn't really be getting tagged by them too much anyways. We just kind of let them group up, and then we CC them and nuke them down quickly, so we haven't noticed anything, but they might be hitting harder. And then the Oros slow, if you left Oros up. You can opt to not leave Oros up, right, if you're not comfortable with your group dealing with all those abilities under being slowed. That's completely up to you. But like I said, I do think on the higher key levels, you're going to see both Oros and Soggodon skipped. After this boss, did we do the huge Incarn pull here. Triple pull. There is, again, though, only one Staghorn. You do need to be careful. I would say you want to drag the pack. Run forward after these two guys have padded around in a circle here. Grab these guys and just run back to like this area there. And that's kind of where it's like safe. These guys will just kind of pat in a circle around here, so no one will accidentally aggro them. And in general, this pack is a little dangerous with the random acid damage, but overall, we're able to usually handle this quite well with minimal deaths. Just need to watch your feet for the swirlies. Try not to overlap each other. There's a lot going on in this pull, but there is only one dude to kick, and that's the Staghorn. So just make sure you're getting kicks on him and just try and cleave this group down without pulling these flyers. Now again, if you had 70% at the end of your maze, this is enough. This is all you need, and you are done. If you got something like 65%, right? Let's put 65% in here. Where is it? There it is. Let's say that initial one I did was 65, I believe. Yeah, so it was a 57 and then a 65. You still need 5 more percent. So literally just this pack here will cover that 5%. You're done. This pack, I believe, is 6.5%. Yeah, so if you got a really, really bad maze, let's say you just didn't get this, you're still missing one tiny thing over here, which is slightly unfortunate, but you can pick up a single flyer from the air because they fly right above you here. So just try and do that. If you get really, really unlucky and somehow just aren't able to get anything here, I don't know if that's possible. I don't think you can get a 57 maze if you don't use any of these, right? You should be able to get like this one at the bare minimum and not be a 57 maze. So in general, 65 is like the bare minimum you want to be at leaving this area if you can be, whereas 70 is the like we're golden going into the last part of this dungeon. But that just about wraps up my advanced tormented route for Mists of Tirna Scithe. I know it's a little less specific because of the maze, but hopefully the tips I gave you about the maze help you out and help you finish this area with some higher percentage than you would have normally. Remember, if you found this video useful, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like it. If you have any questions at all regarding stuff in the maze, this route, the dungeon, or even just Mythic Plus and tanking in general, feel free to leave a question down below or stop by my Twitch channel at Tactics and I'll do my best to answer. That's all for me though. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.